Hello there, Adam Gower here, and welcome to today's episode of the Gower Crowd podcast, syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com. Now, my guest today is a fellow called Dr. Jeff Anzalone, and he runs a website called Debt Free Doctor. What I like about Jeff particularly is that he started in real estate crowdfunding. So obviously he's a doctor, he's a periodontist based in Louisiana. So he has a fabulous Louisiana accent. I know it sounds daft that coming from an Englishman, but his mission is to help other doctors in the industry to become debt free and to invest in real estate. What I like particularly about Jeff is his unabashed authenticity. If you go to his website, Debt Free Doctor, and you'll find a link to that on the show notes page for today's episode, he talks about his first foray into real estate crowdfunding. It's something that we touch on today. And the reason that that's so authentic is that it wasn't the best of experiences for him. You're going to hear about that in today's episode. And Jeff also has some extremely interesting insights into the way that doctors, medical professionals think. You'll hear it today where he describes the way that medical practices are actually run. You don't really think about them as being businesses and the kind of stresses that doctors undergo on a day-to-day basis. You really don't. So you're going to find the conversation with Jeff very interesting and illustrative, and it will give you some deep insight into how to approach the medical profession as well when you are trying to raise money. Be sure to go to gowercrowd.com to the podcast page for today's episode, where you'll find out more about Jeff, access to his website over there as well. And while you are there at gowercrowd.com, hit the subscribe button if you've not already done so, and sign up for my brand new newsletter. Comes out on Wednesdays with a news brief that covers the prior week's happenings in the world of real estate crowdfunding, exclusively focused on real estate crowdfunding. And on Saturdays, you get educational content and access to opportunities that you won't see anywhere else, all there at gowercrowd.com. And now, my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jeff Anzalone, thedebtfreedoctor.com. Jeff, what a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I love that you've got for anyone that is not watching the video, Jeff has got a ginormous $100 bill plastered on the wall behind him. It looks like it's one of the color ones. You don't see those very much. Actually, I don't see cash very much these days. All right. It's somebody, I just had to have somebody over to one of my properties to do some maintenance work. And she wrote back to me afterwards. She said, I asked her, how can I pay you? Oh, she said, I don't know. How do you want to pay or something? So I don't care. I just don't want to pay cash. So who the hell uses cash these days, crying out loud? All right. So you and I chatted a little bit by email before. You have got a website where you, by the looks of it, raise money for real estate. You have to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. And you focus on the physician network. Let's put it that way. So one of the things that I did want to talk to you about was, what does it take, or what should a sponsor, developer keep in mind specifically when trying to raise money from doctors? Let's drill down on that topic. So I'm going to let you start with that very broad, open-ended question.
I think the easy answer to that question would be put yourself in their shoes. And I don't think people do that. They automatically think, hey, here's a doctor. They make a lot of money. They've got this big S on their shirt that doesn't stand for Superman. It stands for sucker, and being a doctor, I can certainly attest to that, being pitched many different, products and services over the last, 15, 17 years of my practice. So we become leery about that. And we anytime now somebody wants to tell us something, whatever, it's almost like a reflex action. Hey, what is he trying to sell me? And, I would say I would focus more on building trust with that person, educating that person, sort of trying to figure out how to get into their circle of influence. Perfect example is Bernie Madoff. He was very good about that, because once, we have such a small circle of influence typically. And once you are able to penetrate that area, then you're in basically. So I would focus more from that perspective.
Right, so we have to drill down on that. By the way, I just saw a super cool pop-up on your website. It's really good. Are you using Convert Pro? What have you got on your website that just did that? It's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
You got to pick PNG. Go to debt-free doctor, debt-freedr.com. If you sit on the homepage for long enough, this really cool little pop-up shows up. Just saying.
Thank you.
It's really good. All right, so now let's drill down on that, because it's a really interesting topic. First of all, have the first question that I wrote down, I should go through it in order, even though it's going to be out of sequence with what you said, actually, is, so what you've just described could apply to anyone. Why is it any different? Why are doctors, you think, any different? Do you think that real estate developers, when they pitch doctors particularly, pitch them in a different way than they do, say, a tech entrepreneur or I don't know, an accountant, right? Or a business owner? Are you treated in any way different? I mean, it seems to me that the idea of approaching a doctor thinking there's a big S on the front as a sucker would be, I can't imagine that, because you're quite bright. I mean, you've been to university for about 40 years before you're allowed to practice, so you can't be a sucker. Tell me more about what you think. What does that mean, and why is it any different than any other industry?
Well, I've been around other doctors long enough to realize now this is just a sort of a general idea. I mean, this is not every single person is like this, but the general consensus is, hey, they have this arrogance to them and they think that they're smarter. Hey, I've gone to school for so long. I've typically made top in the class, made great grades. They think they know everything about everything. And it's just, they have that sort of air to them. Now, again, I'm not saying everybody is like that, but whenever you talk to these people, these other doctors, it seems like that they're, a lot of times they're easy prey, because you can just promise them something and, a lot of times they want to be the first to get, whether they get in a deal first or they want to be the first one where they can brag to their other colleagues. Hey, did you invest in this stock, or did you invest in this deal? I made all this money. And so it's a lot of pride part to it as well.
That's interesting. So you mentioned people have pitched you in the past, and obviously everybody's pitched, but again, this is an interesting take on it. A close personal friend of mine many years ago was a neurosurgeon, and I found him to be absolutely brilliant, actually, in everything that he touched. And so as a real estate developer, how do I want to communicate with physicians? Do I want to do I want to assume that they do have a high level of understanding of real estate and kind of discuss it from a detailed, sophisticated way? Or do I want to start at a 101 level and then dive deep? Or what's the best approach, do you think?
I would say, and I believe the guy that coined this phrase or this term was Robert Collier, Robert Collier principle.
Okay. No, Robert Collier was a letter writer. He wrote letters. Robert Collier wrote the famous books called Robert Collier Letter Book, written in 1934. And what he specialized in was direct mail, direct marketing. But a lot of the lessons that are can be learned from Robert Collier apply to sales today? So tell me what you thought Robert Collier said, because I bet there's a connection there.
And I think we should tell your audience that this was not staged. I had no idea you had the book just to the left of you.
Sitting right next to me on my desk, waiting for me to pass all the notes and kind of apply them immediately. Yeah. It's an amazing book.
As a student, I could tell that you know what I'm going to say, but the only thing that I know from him besides the direct mail is you enter the conversation, already taking place in our mind. So you need to figure out what's in our mind and meet us there. And unless you can empathize with what we're dealing with, because the general public typically thinks, hey, there's a guy, he's a doctor, he's got it all under control, he's got the lifestyle, he's got the money, he's got the everything. And they don't realize the amount of debt that we have, the amount of taxes that we have, how prevalent burnout is. And once you start learning about that, then you're able to figure out, well, what benefit could real estate have? And with meeting those issues. And I think that's why my blog has become so successful so quickly, is because I am the prospect. I know what they're going through. I deal with it every day, and I talk their language, and it's just been really easy for me to do it because I'm dealing with the tax issues, and I'm dealing with how real estate can help with that, and the burnout. People are just miserable. Well, real estate can help with passive income to get you out of your practice if you want to. So I think that from my point of view, that's really helped a lot.
That's really interesting. All right, so let me ask you this: what kind of put some numbers on it, if you don't mind? What are the 3 biggest concerns doctors have that real estate solves? If you were going to line up the top 3 issues, what would they be?
I would, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with Robert Kiyosaki. As a doctor, I guess the light bulb really comes on a lot of times when we discuss the cash flow quadrant. And once we realize that, hey, we're nothing more than an employee or a self-employed person, we're trading time for dollars. So I think that would be one of the top, if not the top thing that it solves. It helps us go from the left side, which is, quote, the poor side, to the right side of the quadrant, which is, instead of you working for your money works for you. And I think real estate really helps with that. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nice to have, I've mentioned this a few times on some podcasts recently. So anyone listening, here's this yet again, forgive me. But we just completed an investor survey. We sent out surveys to 40,000 investors, and I did some one-on-one interviews as well. And one of the what I found with, it's interesting you say this, because what I did find with doctors was that one of the driving motivators to investing in real estate was replacing existing income. And it's interesting that you described that as being kind of an hourly, your time is money, right? That you can only earn as much as you work hours to the day. So the nice thing is that if you can invest some of that money that fills that replaces that, if you like. I'm thinking about guys that are moving, obviously you're much younger, but for guys that are moving towards retirement, how do I maintain my standard of living in retirement when I stop working? How do I do that?
Yeah.
Right. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, if somebody would take the time to learn again what we're going through, because each year typically the insurance reimbursements go down. We have to dedicate more employee time to filling out more paperwork for insurance. So that means that we have to see higher volume of patients, which means we have to work longer. So we're having to go through all this just to barely maintain or even be a slightly less the income level as previous years. And it just keeps getting worse and worse each year. And I think after doing that for 15, 20 plus years, that's when people really start to have the burnout creep in.
So do you think of yourself as a doctor or as a struggling businessman?
I would say that they would probably think of it as both, because we don't get any type of business or finance training at all. And now and this is from a self-employed person. Now, somebody that just works for a hospital or for a clinic, that could be different, but I have to speak on it from my point of view.
And your point of view is as what exactly? Not as an employee of a big medical institution of any sort, but as an independent practicing,
correct,
standalone doctor.
Right. So, you got just your typical W-2 employee that works for a big hospital or corporation. Mm-hmm. Then you have somebody like me that either owns their own practice or they're in a group practice that are outside of a hospital.
And that is like running a business, right? You're constantly having.
Absolutely.
So you have to think about marketing and keeping, I want to say clients, patients happy, mm-hmm. staying in touch with patients. Has COVID been had a negative impact in the sense people aren't showing? You're a periodontist, right?
Right.
Which is what, for those who don't know exactly what a periodontist is?
We focus more on the surgical aspect of dentistry. So dental implants, extractions, bone grafting, all the stuff you probably don't want to have done to you.
That's right. What a deal. Gosh, is that incredible? You give such a beautiful result and yet nobody actually wants it.
Yeah.
Crazy. Now that's the exact opposite of real estate. It's what I tell sponsors. And as you know, we build systems so sponsors can raise money, right? We talk about your website a little bit. But what real estate developers have is actually, here's an interesting, let's think about this. This is interesting. So a real estate developer has exactly what an investor wants. They offer wealth development, right? You can build your wealth if you invest with me, and I'll pay you passive income. That is exactly what investors want. And yet, investors are instinctively skeptical and suspicious, right? When they first meet a developer, even though that person has what they want. It's the exact opposite for a doctor. I don't want what you've got, but if I have to have it, heck yes, I trust you to do it, right? Yeah. That's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it?
It is, very much so.
So how do doctors come to trust developers? Do you have you presumably have the same skepticism? What does it take to earn the trust? You talked about the circle of influence. What is that exactly? In a practical terms, what does that mean?
I would think it's the people that you're, here's a good example. I remember when I first got out in practice, this was, some 15 plus years ago, and was just starting to invest, like, in a retirement account. So I started doing that. And there was a local dentist here that was, I thought, based on the practice he had, the cars he drove, the house he lived in, looked very successful. So he sent out an email to a lot of the people in the dental community to tell them that the person, his financial advisor group that was from Texas, that has helped him be very successful, was coming in to our area in Louisiana to give a talk and a dinner. And I think that right there is like, oh, well, if hey, look at this guy, he's real successful, and here's the person that helped him, shoot, I'm in. Boom. There was nothing more to that. And what was even better was they had to break it up into two separate outings because there was so much of interest. They couldn't fit all the people in the room. So that's a good example of how to do that, to win the trust and get into the circle of influence of who you deal with on a daily or weekly basis.
So what about online? You're talking about the in-person world, which is off limits
Mm-hmm.
and limited, right?
Right.
You can only go as far as you can drive in half an hour and etc. But online, like you and I are talking now, you can
Mm-hmm.
reach just about everybody in the world. So are there any platforms, or I noticed I opened up your latest blog that talks about now I've closed out because I went back to your homepage. Talks about 7 blogs to follow or something. I do hope you'll add 9. I'm just saying it's not on there. But we've only just met, so I don't expect you to. But what about for a developer? Where are the great places to go? Not to learn about real estate, but to find doctors who want to invest in real estate other than your website.
Okay, that we'll go back to the Robert Collier principle. Meet your customer where he is. So the where is that doctor going to be online? Well, it's not going to be the guy that's looking for COVID treatments. It's going to be the guy where does that guy going to learn about finance? Maybe not so much real estate, but learn about money. And once you figure out, and Facebook groups, and again, I'm not a big IT person, and I'm sure there's people out there that could teach me or teach other people how to search Facebook groups or whatever to figure out where those people are. But meet those people where they are, and then just start educating. One of the ways that I met one of the guys that helps me with my practice website was I found him on a forum. It was for dentists only. And all he was doing, he never said anything about his website. He was just answering questions as people would post them. And then in his little signature was his contact information. So it was a very discreet way to organically acquire, clients.
Isn't that interesting? That's a way of building trust.
Yeah.
That's how you develop a relationship, right? You communicate, you provide value, you are selfless, and it develops a relation. You could develop a relationship with people that way, right? That's what draws them to you. Is that how you? What's the biggest challenge you have finding new patients? How do you do that?
New patients.
Yeah.
Two main sources are from other dentists. So I focus on networking with those local dentists, and then the other way is online. Figuring out what they're searching for. And one of the ways that helps me get better each month is whenever somebody comes to see me, I'll ask them, well, how did you hear about us? And if they say, well, I found you online, well, I'll ask you, do you remember what you were searching for? And if it's something off the wall that I'm not already, running Google ads or something like that for, then I will pass that along to the person that handles that for me. Because, I'm thinking more in technical terms, like an implant supported denture, whereas they're like, oh, yes, I searched for snap-on teeth. What is snap-on teeth? But that's
what they search for. Right.
That's what they search for. So then I'll ask my guy, is that a key word? And he's like, no. And we'll add it to it and then test it.
So now, are there any sites that you are listed on that drives traffic to you as well? That are exclusive. I'm actually going to I have something specific in mind actually on this, but where all dentists are listed. Somebody go for, where do I find a good dentist near me? And it's a clearinghouse for dentists. Are there such platforms like that? Then I'd put in my zip code.
Yeah.
And I got a toothache, or, I'm looking for snap-on teeth, and then up pops a list of, I'm not talking about Yelp, right? But something like that specifically for dentists.
Probably, and I'm checking it now, but probably the ADA.org, the American Dental Association.
Okay.
And that would probably be a site to where you could maybe search for, there'll be like a for patient, one would be for patients and one would be for providers. Or you could probably go to, and again, I don't know that that's possible, but I would think that. And then you could look for you could search for the individual state that you live in, like Louisiana Dental Association. And that would, you could search that way as well, I would think.
Right. So here's where I'm headed with that.
Okay.
Right? So now you are listed on that website, maybe because you're a member, right? I presume you pay dues, and so you're up there, and
right.
It expires, and so you got to update. You've got a profile on there, and there's various other things that you can do. Do you ever, in your communication with the ADA, do you ever get contacted by them for other things that you might be interested in? For example, do they ever send you emails that say, hey, would you be interested in investing in real estate? I'm being a little crude about it, just to make the point.
Right.
When you go to that website, when you're on there, or when you hear from them, typically you hear presumably professional related content. But do you ever get anything different from them? Sponsorship? You do not?
No.
And if you did, how would you react to that? If a sponsor came to them and said, hey, we want to advertise, we've got this national fund, we've got a fund in Louisiana, and we want to raise money, can we send an email to your database? I don't know if they'd say yes or not.
Yeah.
I actually have not a client, but a friend of mine has an incredible connection with something similar. I'm not going to be indiscreet. But if you were to get an email from the ADA saying, hey, look, are you interested in real estate or something? Would that be too off the wall?
I don't think so. From my experience with the Louisiana Dental Association, there is a section on there of the endorsed providers, and it's typically local, and it's the people that the LDA or the Louisiana Dental Association trusts and recommends that we use. So that right there helps us break through a lot. For instance, like credit card merchant person, there's a gazillion of those cats out there, right? But if I got the LDA, the Louisiana Dental Association, that's recommended, hey, we trust this one group, I'm going to be a lot more, involved with them, selecting them, than I am maybe somebody else.
And are you personally involved in any of those associations, like in active roles? Again, I've got no idea how the industry works, but do you get involved on committees or councils or anything, or not?
No.
But they do have doctors that are, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to what we were talking about initially, and that's the idea of how you approach. And you were talking about, Robert Collier, the idea of joining the conversation that is already going on in your prospect's mind.
Right.
And something that you've talked about very early on while we were chatting was this idea that doctors like to feel somehow special, privileged, that they have something they can brag about in some way. And what that speaks to a little bit, it is interesting, is that it speaks a little bit to ego. Now, if we peel back some of the layers that we've got, you've also described the struggle that doctors have. So what's going on there? What is the conversation that's going on in a doctor's mind if on the one hand they want to, be a bit braggadocio, whatever it's called, right? And yet on the other hand, the reality is, damn, this is hard bloody work. How do I get out of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times it's a constant struggle with perception, public perception. What's the public think about you? But yet what's really happening to do that? A lot of times people will go into more debt, consumer debt, just to play the part or look the part, to keep the country club membership up, to keep the car leases going, So, they have, as soon as you hear somebody's a doctor, well, you automatically think, okay, well, then they must have a nice home. They must drive nice vehicles. It's that perception. And problem with us is we go to school for so long and we get out and we have all this debt. And then, but all of our friends that graduated 10 years before us, they already have all the stuff that we want. So we start off at, wait a minute, that guy's just a plumber and he drives a nicer vehicle than me and he does this and that. And I want all this stuff now. And then they get into all this consumer debt and they never dig out from the hole, which snowballs because they start hating their job, yet they can't get out of it. What is that called? It's like sunk cost something.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sunk, like it's hard to do anything else, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, there's no way I could stop practicing because I have to pay for too much crap. And it's just like they're stuck.
Jeff, it's interesting you say that because when I look at doctors, and I have doctors on my in-laws side, my wife's side, that everyone's doctors. And the big difference that I see is not, I don't think well-heeled as much as having a predictable income stream. My life has always been real estate. It's been very entrepreneurial and it's not predictable, right? You've got to work hard and then you might close a deal and do well. And there's lots of other people that can lose everything and it's much higher risk. If you are, as a doctor, you have certainty of employment though, don't you? I mean, there is that you take on more debt. And I know that your website is Debt Free Doctor, but just to play the devil's advocate a little bit here, you can take on debt because you have the ability to cover that debt, right? That you have a career and that there will always be income. Right? You show up 9 to 5, whatever your hours are, and it's predictable. Isn't there a beauty in that? Isn't it the kind of grass is greener in a way?
Yeah. I think that's a plus and it's a minus because again, we think, hey, I'm always going to have this income. And what's the big deal about getting $100,000 car lease? But what happens when COVID hits that you never, what is that called? Like the black swan event. Nobody sees it coming.
Yeah.
And, we're shut down for 2 months. And there was a lot of other states that were shut down a lot longer. So you get somebody 2, 3, 4 months or more without any income coming in. They still have bills to pay, a practice to, employees to pay or supplies or whatever. It's tough. So that's what could happen.
And real estate pitched the right way can help alleviate that kind of
uncertainty, I guess. Yeah. Because we talked earlier about, you said you wanted 3 things, and we said the first one was regarding the trading time for money, and I think the second one would probably be that having some sort of lowering your risk. The older we get, the less risky we want to be. So I was 99% in the stock market before real estate. I was in index funds, and I knew that I needed to lower my risk and I needed to diversify. So in real estate is a asset class that can help with that.
Okay, tell me about what it is that you do with Debt Free Doctor, and then we will move to my sign-off questions. I've just looked at the time. I can't believe we've been talking for as long as we have already. It's gone very fast, and I've got 3 quick fire questions I do want to ask you, but I am interested in knowing what it is that you're doing over there at Debt Free Doctor. Tell me more about that.
Well, it started off as a blog, just teaching people about my experience with practice and finances and the mistakes that we've made, and hopefully that the same people wouldn't make the same mistake. And then about 1.5 years ago, because we were getting more and more into real estate, I decided to make a switch and focus mainly on real estate for other doctors and healthcare providers. And it's just information. And then last year, I learned about the possibility of working with people to help raise capital. I mean, had no clue about it. And I got into it a little bit, and was this past year, right as COVID was hitting, I was given a deal to try to raise capital for. But when all of that happened, you know, a lot of people got scared and like, I can't invest anything because I don't have a job. So that really didn't go real well, which I don't know if I really should count that as the first time I've raised capital, but it really was. And then the second time that I've have helped people with the deal was just actually last month. So that was really my quote first time to, you know, go through the whole process, send out emails and that sort of thing. And I really like it because I'm able to provide other doctors with good deals with after people, you know, that like sponsors that I've vetted and that sort of thing. So that they really trust, you know, that. So I guess I'm kind of the spokesman. So I guess if you're people out there, if your sponsors can maybe find that like a spokesperson that other people would trust, that's kind of it's just kind of happened that way with me.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Jeff, let me sign off if you don't mind. I have 3 lightning questions that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
First one, what are your key daily habits that make you successful? Personal habits.
I would say waking up early, reading the Bible every day, reading a lot, and getting to work before everyone else does.
So what is early for you?
I wake up at 6, but I get to the office an hour before everyone else gets here. So I'm able to, you know, focus on the goals that I have for the day and make sure that those goals are met before I leave.
Perfect. Second of my last 3 questions. What has been the biggest mistake that you have made in your career? Now, I would say in real estate, but you've not been in real estate for that long. So let me ask you just kind of general career, biggest mistake you've made. Or biggest lesson. It's the wrong question. Sorry. Hardest lesson. That's my question. Yes. Not biggest mistake. Hardest lesson learned.
Which actually has to do with real estate. I started off with crowdfunding online. Just $1,000 here, $2,000 there. Thought I knew what I was doing. Decided to step it up, invest in an apartment complex. It was a syndication in Tulsa. Wound up, every investor lost all of their money, lost 50 grand. That was a pretty big deal. And that actually helped me because I took a step back to realize I didn't know what I was doing. And I really started learning about it. And then from there, that was sort of the catalyst to start teaching people about my failures, and then now what you should look for instead of just looking for the returns, the best returns and the prettiest pictures on the website.
That's a hard lesson, Jeff.
That it is.
Yeah. And just without being indiscreet, obviously, but how did you find the deal? When you say crowdfunding, was it on a...
It was, and the website has been taken over now because I guess maybe because it's how it is. It was on Realty Shares. And that's, you know, we're told that they look at and they filter through all these deals every month, and they're only putting the best ones on the website. So we're putting our trust in a website, and we don't have no idea what the sponsor is, anything about them. So my job is to really educate people so they don't make that mistake again.
Thanks for sharing that. I actually think that's the most important lesson you can have in real estate, actually, is to go through a downturn or to lose money, as harsh as that sounds.
And I've written an entire article that it kind of details it on my website.
Oh, I love that. So I should check that out. In fact, put a link to that on my website for you. All
My
right.
biggest failure.
Well, no, the biggest lesson learned. I think
Lesson.
that's what, right? Failure is just a step forwards. Okay, last question. For a developer who wants to raise money from doctors, what would be the most important thing they should keep in mind?
Probably what we talked about before, finding out what the target audience, which in this case, a doctor, what are their pain points, and then providing benefits to each of those pain points that their product or service could alleviate. So for instance, I used to always try to explain to patients, hey, a dental implant is a screw that goes in your bone and this and that. They don't want to hear about that. They want to know what the benefit is. It's going to allow you to chew better, build your confidence. You can smile. And once you start talking in those terms.
You talk about the benefits. That's what
Correct.
sells.
The benefits.
Not the details.
Exactly.
Dr. Jeff Anzalone, who runs Debt Free Doctor, debtfreedr.com, periodontist in Louisiana. I have to say, as wacky as this sounds, I know here in America, you have the most fabulous accent. Thanks so much for being on my podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on there and enjoyed it very much.
That was Jeff Anzalone at debtfreedoctor.com. And what did I tell you? Some deep insights into the way that the medical industry, or the doctors and physicians everywhere, actually think that they are essentially running businesses as well and have overhead and insurance and rent to pay and etc., etc. Lots of stresses, deep insightful stuff from Dr. Anzalone right there. Find out more about him at gowercrowd.com on the podcast page, and be sure to sign up for the newsletter, the Gower Crowd newsletter. You'll see a subscribe button on every page. Click that button if you are not already signed up and get access to our Wednesday news brief and our Saturday educational emails every single week into your inbox, absolutely free. All there at gowercrowd.com. That's it. Thanks so much for listening. And thank you, Jeff Anzalone, Debt Free Doctor. I really enjoyed meeting you, and I am enjoying getting to know you better as we work together. Thanks so much for that opportunity. It is a lot of fun. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time. And in the meantime, stay well. And for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower, different kind of doctor, of course, signing off.